Hello everyone, welcome to the Green Man channel. Hope you're all doing good and well today. Now, as it's horror season and we're rapidly approaching Halloween, I couldn't resist the temptation to go with that a bit and to rank the films of one of the big horror movie franchises, and I've chosen A Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, I could have also chosen to do Friday the 13th and Halloween, and I may get around to that at some point, but there are so many films to get through. A Nightmare on Elm Street actually seems to have a slightly fewer number of sequels, I think. So anyway, I really enjoy these films as well, even though there are some which are, how do we put it, pretty bad movies. They were all in their own ways, I think, pretty entertaining at the very least. So I have enjoyed going through them and watching them all, in spite of whatever problems or flaws they seem to have. The other thing to preface this with, and I felt it's important to mention, is I haven't included the 2010 remake on this list, so you will spot that if you're a big fan of this franchise. It's partly as I still haven't seen that one yet, so it's not fair to pass judgment. But I don't like these kind of remakes, particularly the ones that, with a lot of horror villains. I like it when they keep their mystique, actually. And something which we've found increasingly, I almost feel like, since the Dark Knight era of the Joker from the Batman films, there's always been this push or this desire to give a real deep backstory to lots of our kind of favourite horror villains, and I don't really think that's necessary. I think it's good and important, actually, sometimes to keep a mystique about horror villains sometimes, or a villain full stop. So in this case, I probably wouldn't enjoy the remake, but I'd be willing to still give it a chance at least. Anyway, so there are 8 films here that I'm ranking from least favourite to favourite. I'm going to start with my least favourite, which is Dream Child, A Nightmare on Elm Street 5. This was kind of in the second coming, if you like, of the Nightmare on Elm Street films, with Alice as the main character. And she has these special powers and this ability to pull other people into her dreams and stuff. Quite interesting concept. And in this particular film, in this era of the Nightmare films, Freddy returns via Alice's unborn child in his dreams, or in his sleep even, and it's all pretty bizarre. I do still enjoy some of the abstractness and some of the abstract scenes in this film. I think Mark's death, as it were, is kind of interesting. He's like a paper cutout, and he's being slashed to death by Freddy. And that was really interesting and abstract, and I quite liked that scene, actually. I thought it was very inventive. But apart from that, there wasn't much else in this film to really latch onto and to really sort of get you in. And actually, out of all the films, I found this perhaps one of the more uninteresting Nightmare films as well. And it was so confusing towards the end, it just made zero sense. And the last scene was so bizarre as to be just like bewildering, almost. It's so strange. But anyway, that's Dream Child, which comes in as my least favourite at number 8. Number 7, I've put Freddy vs. Jason, which might be slightly controversial because I think quite a few people enjoy this kind of crossover that there was. And there were some entertaining kills and a lot of chaos in this film, which was easy to watch. I'd say as a positive. The film felt very shallow, though, very gratuitous. There wasn't much depth to anything, many of the characters, maybe one or two, but I did like the bringing together of the horror icons. But for me, this is my second least favourite, I think, of the films that I've seen from A Nightmare on Elm Street, from this franchise. Number 6 is actually A Nightmare on Elm Street 6, a film which was completely panned, and which a lot of people don't like. So I do kind of get why that might be. It's very over the top. It's very goofy. There's some laughable acting, to be frank, and some dreadful scenes in this film. But that aside, it's highly entertaining for what it is. Again, there's a lot of very inventive sequences, some slightly overly drawn out sequences as well. But I did like Freddy's Dead: A Final Nightmare. I thought that, it was over the top as it was the 3D glasses thing as well was, I didn't really understand that, but that was quite entertaining, I suppose. And Yaphet Kotto's appearance, actually, I quite enjoyed in this film as well, partly because I love Yaphet Kotto, so maybe a bit of bias there. But this one is one of those films that is almost so bad it's good, and is therefore a guilty pleasure choice, perhaps why it's not right at the bottom of my list, but it comes in here, number 6. Number 5, I put The Dream Master. Again, perhaps one that might be slightly higher up on others' lists, but for me, it's still in the lower half. I did like quite a few of the sort of more disturbing sequences in this film. I think there's one sequence in particular with Debbie. It is where she becomes a cockroach, which is really disturbing, and I think one of the highlights of the whole franchise, actually. And that one's memorable scene, I think, is one of the things, and a couple of other memorable death scenes, if you like, in this film, which put it slightly higher on my list, because I do think they were very, very clever and well directed. And although The Dream Master, again, I think is a little bit lacking in substance, its abstractness and inventiveness, I think, it does score it points, and it did make it quite enjoyable as a watch for me. I did still quite like watching this one. So it's number 5 of 8 on my list. Next up, coming in at number 4, we're in the top half now. These are the films that I did really enjoy, all 4 of these films of the Nightmare franchise. Freddy's Revenge. And this one is pretty low rated on IMDb. A lot of people don't like it. I am in the camp that actually like this film. Still suffers from a lot of the sequel issues that a lot of horror franchises seem to have, in not making a lot of sense, a lot of plot holes, a lot of bizarre, over the top things. But I liked it. It was slightly subversive, particularly for the time this film came out. I liked the subversiveness of Freddy's Revenge. Also, some spectacular scenes in this, I think, which the whole Freddy possession thing, where you're kind of looking. I think there's one memorable shot I can think of where the camera's looking into the back of Jesse's throat, and you can see Freddy's head there. It was really bizarre and freaky, but I thought very, very, very inventive and clever again, and again demonstrating why I think this franchise gets the fans it does, because it is just so. There are so many abstract sequences like that are very memorable. And I did quite enjoy this. I didn't think the acting was too bad, and it I liked I think it was Lisa, these kind of co-leads in this film. I quite liked her character as well, as kind of caring character, who turns out to be who was kind of saving Jesse in the end, as I recall. I just quite liked that. I didn't think this was that bad a film. Okay, it wasn't great, but it is actually one of my slightly preferred of the sequels. Excuse me. So number 3 on my list is the second sequel, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, very popular one, and I did absolutely thoroughly enjoy and was thoroughly entertained by this second sequel. It has, I think, of all the films, perhaps the most memorable number or memorable kills in numbers, where there are lots of really inventive and memorable death scenes in this film, as unpleasant as that sounds and morbid. There was some really, really clever stuff with Freddy in this film. In particular, I would just probably name my favourite, which is where Freddy is puppeteering Philip, I think it is, in the first kill scene, puppeteering him with his tendons coming out. It's really quite bizarre, disturbing, but an amazing scene, actually, brilliantly executed. And just what a way to start. It takes quite a while to get to that scene and to get to the first kill of A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, but really like it. And I like the concept of this one, that they're getting together, they're grouping together to try and take on Freddy. I liked that concept and idea. It offered something different for the franchise and something especially good and memorable. Number 2 on my list now, this is where we get to the films, obviously, that are, I think, the very best, the very best 2 films of the franchise. And you would have worked out by elimination that there are only 2 films left. And at number 2 on this list is Wes Craven's New Nightmare. which being the sixth, I suppose it's not strictly speaking a sequel, but towards the end it felt more like a sequel. It was a sort of reinterpretation by the director almost of this whole franchise, by making it seem like it's a reality. You're actually looking at the actors and actresses at the start of this film, and you're not looking at another Nightmare film. So it almost starts a bit like a documentaries type thing. But then he switches it, he flips it in the sort of later part of the film, where you realise, no, this is actually going to be another Nightmare on Elm Street. So Wes Craven is kind of tricking its audiences almost into thinking, well, what's this film? What angle is it taking? And he does that, I think, inspired, I think, the Scream films and perhaps other films, many films that came after it as well. So, I mean, top scores for this film, I think at the time it was fairly original as an idea. I thought that it at times was quite reminiscent of the first film in its suspense building, that it didn't go over the top with the kills, but the kills were still, quite scary and disturbing, particularly Julie's. And Freddy becomes menacing again. It's like he's found his threatening, menacing side again that he lost in the later sequels. So lots of good things from A New Nightmare, and for that reason, number 2 in my list. But of course, as is often the case with these film lists I do, it's always the original that seems to come out on top. But I mean, in this instance, it's hard to say that the original isn't just an outstanding horror film. This for me has the depth, it has good characters, it has Freddy at his most menacing, and it has really memorable kill scenes. And there is one scene in this which, to this day, if I was going to do a video ranking the most memorable, morbid subjects, but as it's horror season, maybe it is one to do at some stage, ranking my most memorable kill scenes from horror films. Tina's scene in the first kind of quarter of an hour, I think it is, of the original film, is to this day one of the most terrifying scenes I can think of that I've seen in a horror film. When I saw that when I was young, it is a pretty disturbing scene to see, and that's the first one. This is a way to make a classic horror film hit hard, is you start off with the first kind of death scene being one like that. Wow. Anyway, that's the end of my ranking. So the original comes out on top. Again, like with, I think, the Alien films I did recently, a little bit predictable maybe, but there were some, I think, maybe some slightly more surprise choices in there as well that were higher up. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Do feel to like and subscribe if you like, some of the stuff I do on this channel, which ranges from sci-fi, fantasy, and horror coverage to a lot of music reviews, a lot of album reviews I do on the channel as well. Anyway, take care, everybody. Bye for now. Hope you enjoy your weekends.